send everyone also the link for this type of?
No.
Does that work? Yep. Okay, so good morning. I'm Stéphane Popinet. I have the honor of presiding this jury. So the jury of the PhD of Ahmed, Basil, KOTTILINGAL. I will start by presenting the members of the jury, so starting from the right. So we have Stéphane Zaleski, a professor at Sorbonne University. Then we have Taraneh Sayadi, soon to be a professor at the Conservatoire National des Arts et Métiers. Stéphane Vincent, who is a professor at Gustave Eiffel University. I got that right. Okay, then we have Ruben Scardovelli, who is a professor University of Bologna, and we have an invited member who is Daniel Fuster, who is a directeur de recherche in d'Alembert. So before we ask questions, we will have 45 minutes to present, and you can start whenever you are ready. Sorry, I forgot somebody. I forgot Manolis Gavazes, sorry Manolis, who is a professor at City University in London, who is on Zoom. So that was my excuse. Sorry, Manolis, about that. And then you can start.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone who is present here and whoever is attending online. So here I'm present to talk on my thesis. So it's titled Numerical Simulations of Cavitation in Blood Vessels using parallel front tracking method. So as an introduction, I'll bring the context of my problem. So here we have a targeted drug delivery system. So in this context, our aim is to increase the intake of target medicine. So in case of cancer, it will be cancer therapeutic medicine. So you supply this medicine to the location where you find cancer. So along with the therapeutic medicine, you also supply coated microbubbles. So once it reaches the target location or the tissues where you find there is a tumor, you can use focused ultrasound. So these microbubbles respond to the ultrasound waves. It can have a stable cavitation or an collapse, and what happens is it can increase the porosity of the capillary. So capillary is the smallest arteries, which has the thickness of just one epithelial cells. So if we can increase or attain some porosity on this layer of epithelial cell, we can actually increase the intake of medicine at the target location. So here you can see this is an experiment we did in University of Twente with Ali Rezai. So here we have a 10 micrometer channel, not a channel, it's a tube in viscoelastic epoxy. So, and we insonify a supplied microbubble. So coming to my particular problem, the problem involved here is a very complex multiphysics problem. It involves bubble which is responding to a ultrasound. So here we have a multiphase system. We have a blood matrix and also microbubble. And the further complexity is this is a compressible multiphase flow, because we have a compressible microbubble involved, and these microbubble interact with the epithelial cells. So we have to capture the fluid structure interactions also. So we are trying to capture all this except coated microbubble, because it's out of this my work. And also the approach or what we did was to capture a minimalistic simulations of cavitation. So we had to focus on developing a multiphase flow, and that is can capture compressible flows and also interaction of these microbubbles with the blood vessel. So the presentation has a small introduction on an introduction on a multiphase flow using simulation of multiphase flows using front tracking methods, and also development of immersed boundary methods. So we have the similar approach in development of code, and also we have a balanced surface tension model in 2D, and also the main focus of my work was mainly developing a parallel front tracking method. That is the one on which I have spent most time. And then the next one is extension to a compressible system, and few just one simulation I'm showing here, which involved cavitation of a microbubble inside blood vessel. So both the system of front tracking method and immersed boundary method can be put under the Eulerian Lagrangian system of numerical methods, where you have in case of front tracking you have you have an interface or an interface separating two fluids, and in case of immersed boundary you have if you assume the membrane of the is of zero thickness, and if it's constituted out of fibers which are independent from each other, then we have this kind of structure for immersed for a membrane. So we are trying to simulate mostly 2D and axisymmetric simulations involving both. So front tracking method is developed to capture multiphase flow simulations. So here you have an example of a contact line problem. So it was developed by Unverdi and Tryggvason. It is inspired by the immersed boundary method originally done by Peskin. So the advantage of front tracking method, you have an explicit representation of the interface compared to the other multiphase flow solvers like volume of fluid and level set. You have an explicit information on the interface. So this gives an advantage of having an accurate representation of interface, and also better computation on geometric properties like Vecher, etc. So you have a Lagrangian mesh that represent the fluid-fluid interface that is immersed in an Eulerian grid. And in 3D, this is comprised of connected triangular elements. So we'll call this interface as front, as in the literature. So it represents the fluid-fluid interface in the case of front tracking, and in case of we can use the same term for membrane in case of immersed boundary method. So in front is comprised of elements, which in case of 3D is triangular elements, as we have done the coding, and these elements are comprised of vertices, and we have a data set for that, and we also have a data set for the triangles, and we also maintain how these triangles are connected to each other. Coming to the immersed boundary method, you have a thin membrane which is interacting with the flow. So it is originally developed by Peskin in 1972, where he did a simulation of interaction of blood flow with heart valves. So coming to the representation of the interface in immersed boundary method, you have a mapping from in case of a 3D simulation, you have a mapping from R2 to R3 corresponding to the initial configuration and the final configuration. So at any moment the configuration has a elastic energy which can be written as a functional of the points and its geometric properties of the topology. And it can be any change in the topology correspond to a change in energy functional, and from which you can calculate the Lagrangian force density. This I will mention in coming slides. So both the systems you can represent in the, since it involves in the case of immersed boundary method, since it involves fluid, we have this Navier-Stokes equation with the source term corresponding to the membrane force, and the membrane force can be represented as a Fresher derivative of the energy functional, and that can be interpolated to the Eulerian grid using a discrete delta function. And the membrane advex in time, or it moves in time using the local velocity of the marker point, which we calculate from the Eulerian grid using a delta function. And in front tracking it's similar, except instead of using Lagrangian force density from energy functional, here we can calculate the Eulerian force density from an interpolation of the surface tension. And similar to the advection of the membrane, here the fluid-fluid interface also advects with the local velocity, which we calculate from the Eulerian grid. So in this both the system, both the methods, we have to do two kind of interpolations. One is you have to interpolate the force from the geometric or the Lagrangian mesh to the Eulerian mesh. So in case of 3D front tracking, you can calculate the force density on a small patch of the interface using line integral, or in 2D you can find it using derivative of the tangent. And in case of membrane, you have if you assume the membrane is comprised of closely packed fibers, we can actually find the force density corresponding to each fibers. So if a fiber is going through a configuration change, say an elastic configuration change, it will give rise to a tension force in the elements. And also if we have a bending in the configuration, it gives rise to the bending restoration force. So these we calculate on the on an element or an elemental patch that we have to interpolate back to the Eulerian grid. From all so corresponding to a Eulerian grid, you have to interpolate from the nearby elements of the Lagrangian mesh. And also the advection, the another interpolation involved is interpolation of a velocity. So we interpolate the velocity from the Eulerian grid to the Lagrangian points, and then we advect the point using explicit interpolation, explicit time integration, or Runge-Kutta integration. So so you can see how its velocity can be interpolated at a Lagrangian point from the nearby grid points of the AMR grid. So coming to the as mentioned, the equations in compressible flows and it can be represented into corresponding to both the fluids can be represented into a single Navier-Stokes equation, and the properties corresponding to these one fluid formulation is found using a heaviside, which in case of WOF is a volume fraction, and in case of front tracking, it can be calculated from the interface using inverse Laplacian. But here in this thesis, we directly calculate the volume fraction from the interface and use that volume fraction as the heaviside. So we take all the interface, all the elements that cut a particular grid, control volume, and then from which you can calculate the volume fraction in the cell, which I have explained deeply in the appendix of the one of the appendixes. So the advantage is, unlike the inverse Laplacian from the interface, if you use a front to WOF algorithm, even if you have very complex stretching where the elements have normals facing to each other, it still gives a very good, volume fraction correct up to the machine accuracy. As long as the topology is valid, we will get. And for both the methods, I have used Basilisk by Stéphane Poppinet to develop front tracking and immersed boundary method. So the advantage, as everyone here would know, the Basilisk solver gives you the advantage of adaptive mesh refinement, which gives you the freedom to refine the region depending on the requirement. So if you have length scale of different length scales involved, you can capture everything without without a uniform grid of maximum resolution. So it gives a lot of advantage in computational advantage and resource advantage, which is one of the main focus of my parallel front tracking. And here it's also it has very good scalability, which is shown in the website, and everyone could refer to that. So moving to the balanced, I'm moving to next portion. So we developed a balanced surface tension model. So in the model, going to the particular test case, if we take a bubble or a drop which is immersed in another fluid without in the absence of any body force or gravity or any other body force, it should remain at equilibrium with no velocity at any point in the vicinity, I mean in the whole computational domain. But since the terms involved in the Navier-Stokes equation, I mean the discretization of those terms can bring some inconsistencies or the inconsistencies can give rise to a non-zero velocity, which we call as spurious current. So if it doesn't take care of problems of this kind, it can actually diverge and it can collapse. I mean the computation can stop. So we have, like in this particular case, the pressure gradient should be balanced by the surface tension, or the Laplace pressure jump is balanced by the surface tension. And also for discrete momentum conservation, we can if we can represent the surface tension as a derivative of a tensor, we can have momentum conservation. So two of the main aspects of a balanced method is the curvature computation should be accurate, and it should converge to a constant, and the gradient operators in both the pressure discretization involved in pressure gradient and surface tension should be consistent. So this is well discussed in almost all the multiphase flow problems. So this work is very similar to the Popin's 1999 paper, except few like the way I handle interpolations and smoothing algorithm. It's very close to that work. So as mentioned, in this particular case, the pressure gradient should balance with the surface tension. And if you look into the integral of the x component of this momentum equation in a phase-centered cell, you can see the integral carried out on the right and left side. Since there is a pressure jump at the interface, we can split that integral, and the integral of the surface tension can be written in the summation form on all the elements which intersects with the control volume. So in the end, we have a pressure gradient term with the capillary correction, and also the term summed over interfaces, which I mean the front elements which intersect with the control volume. And the capillary pressure can be pressure correction can be it depends whether the grid point lies inside volume domain 1 or domain 2. In that you can write the correction, pressure capillary correction. So going to the few test cases, so the test case which we already discussed, we have an interface separating two fluids, and I mean a circular droplet of diameter d, and we take in the case density ratio and viscosity ratios as one and few different Laplace numbers. The spurious current actually goes to 10 raised to minus 13 for a density ratio 1, and for density ratio 1000 we cannot achieve that for all the Laplace numbers. It actually goes till 10 raised to minus 6 only. And here I haven't put in the slides, but depending on the way these the elements of the front are non-equal, it can give rise to even larger spurious current, which can be taken care if we redistribute every few cycles such a way that the elements are of equal length, because the interpolation error comes in the picture. And in this test case, you give a small perturbation on an initially flat interface separating two fluids, and if the amplitude of the perturbation is very small compared to the wavelength of the perturbation, we have an analytical solution by prosperity. So if we take the non-dimensional numbers, viscosity ratio, density ratio, and Ornesburg number, and we have a very small amplitude ratio, we can compare it with the analytical solution. And for a convergence test, we take different levels of the AMR grid, and for different levels it has a very good second order convergence. Going to the next portion of the presentation, it's a parallel front tracking method. So I will give a small introduction to the methods which you can see in the literature. So the older works which were trying to do parallelization, they tried to come up with a separate processor which takes care of the Lagrangian meshes. So here you can see you have a Lagrangian mesh immersed in an Eulerian grid. So what they do is they separate the Eulerian grid among different processes, and so say if you have four processors will take care of different partitioned computational in Eulerian domain, and a fifth processor will take care of the Lagrangian mesh. But the thing is, this method is not meant to parallelize the front tracking method. They are just focused on parallelizing mostly the Poisson solver for solving the Navier-Stokes equation or the projection method. So the scalability is was only looked for the Eulerian mesh. They never cared about the Lagrangian mesh, and this is a layman method, and you cannot expect a parallelization for a Lagrangian mesh. So the other way is like you have to simulate bubbly flows, and a lot of problems where you have problems like this, where you have a lot of bubbles or drops in a uniform mesh. So what one approach is like, the local processor will take care of the topology that intersect with that computational domain corresponding to a particular processor. So here you can see this is almost close to each other, except here same bubble is partitioned among two processors, but there one of them take care depending on where the centroid lies. Here all the processors that intersects with the Lagrangian mesh will take care of the computation. So here we have a redundant computation and a communication after each cycle. There we have one of them taking care of all the Lagrangian routines, and then communicate the locations and the surface tension, etc., to the other processor. But this is mostly meant for a uniform grid, because I'll show. So here we have two moments where the AMR grid looks like. Since the first one correspond to the third one in the way the Eulerian grid is distributed. If we have a radical change in the sense like there is a huge adaptation happening, the domain corresponding to a one processor changes. These blue correspond to processor 0. Say here you can see the locality changes, and if we cannot use the method because then you have to change the ownership of the bubbles every now and then. So this method is not efficient for adaptive meshes. So we are using something like a distributed front. So here you have an immersed front immersed in a Eulerian grid, and the cells of the Eulerian grid is distributed among processors using a space filling curve. Especially in the case of Basilisk, it's a z-order curve, and we distribute the elements and triangles in such a way that they are local to the domains corresponding to each processor. So here you can see how they are congruent, or the locality is congruent to each other. So say we have a K-way partition of an AMR grid. We have to distribute the leaf cells and also the vertices and elements of the mesh, and as already mentioned, the leaf cells are distributed using z-order curve. So you have a z-order space filling curve, and you take the first you move along the z-order and distribute almost equally based on balanced constraints, and the vertices of the Lagrangian points are distributed such that the rank of the vertex is the processor which contains that the processor whose domain contains that vertex takes the ownership of that vertex. So here you can here you can see this arrow, the region that correspond to Eulerian as the domain corresponding to partitioned Eulerian grid, and all the vertices which lies within that will be owned by that particular processor, and the edges or the edges will be the rank is defined such that which vertex the rank of the vertices which share that particular edge determines the rank of the edge. So whoever has the minimum rank takes the ownership of the edges, and whoever has the ownership of the whoever has the lowest rank in case of a triangle takes care of the triangle. So so this is one test case, advection test case to check scalability. This is only carried up to 16 processors. So what we have done here is we have an advection problem. Initially a bubble at of circular shape advects with a predetermined stream function, and this problem involves AMR adaptation and regridding of the edges or regridding of the front. It involves all the topological operations except topological changes. Not topological operation, regridding operations, adaptive mesh refinement, advection, but this problem doesn't involve a topology change or a Navier-Stokes equation. So instead of taking one circle, we take 4 circles and try to do the advection. So as you increase the level of the refinement, you have more elements involved, and since we have more elements involved, you can expect more scalability, because the communication to the computation on partition set reduces. Like, you have more points, so you have more computation required, but the communication reduces, so you can expect scalability. So these test cases are just for like a robustness. Like we have done this same simulation for different processes, from 8 to 128 processes in the Navier cluster of the lab. So I just compared the profiles for different number of processes, so that the profiles match. It is just to see that the MPI communication doesn't have any bug. So this is an atomization problem in 2D, but here I haven't implemented any topology changes, so the topology remains like that, even if there is so much deformation. And another test case where you have a 2D cluster of bubbles, which is allowed to, which is put in a gravity. So the next portion is I'm going to discuss is extension of this front tracking method to all-max solver. So in all-max solver you have a multi-phase system where you have two fluids and correspondingly these many variables, and internal energy, pressure, velocity, density, and heaviside, corresponding to both the corresponding to points on both the domains. So so this is an extension of volume of fluid method developed by Daniel and Stefan. So you have correspondingly extra equations corresponding to energy, and equation of state, and some of these can be reduced into one equation depending on because F1, F0 and F1 are complementary, but most of the routines are not taken as a one fluid formulation, rather done all the properties, density, momentum, etc. are stored for both the variables instead of one fluid method. And you have to take care of the variable jumps at the interface. Since there is no phase change and no slip, there is zero velocity jump at the interface, and the pressure jump is the correspond to the Laplacian pressure jump and the viscous stress jump. And since there is no energy transfer across the interface, we can take this equation. So we have the implicit equation of the Navier-Stokes equation, which cannot be directly solved because we have un+1 and pn+1 involved. Rather, we try to solve a predicted velocity at n+1. This equation can be split again into two. So first you calculate an advection velocity, or u advection, using consistent advection, which is there in the Allmark paper by Daniel and Popine, Fuster and Popine. Once you calculate the advection equation, advection velocity, you can calculate the predicted velocity, and with some manipulations you can come up with Helmholtz equation, and you can solve Pn+1 and Un+1, and also you can update the internal energy of the system, total energy of the system. And this is I'm giving only one test case here. So we have weakly collapsing bubble. So a bubble which is very small here, you cannot see that, which is initially at equilibrium with the ambient pressure, is suddenly applied with a pressure jump, which will take the bubble into a new equilibrium radius with few oscillations. So if we take the non-dimensional numbers involved, you can compare it with the spherical collapse one-dimensional solution using Rayleigh Placet and Keller mixes. So I have compared also with the original paper by Olmec paper, and so coming to the last section of this presentation, we have simulation of cavitation in blood vessel. So here I haven't pondered in depth because of the time limits. So we are taking I have done only few simulations of cavitation of a bubble with in the vicinity of a membrane. So one of them is cavitation of microbubble inside a blood vessel. So here we take a lot of assumptions in the particular problem. So we assume the bubble is kept exactly at the center of the blood vessel, and we assume the membrane is of zero thickness and also there is another assumption that the tissue that's outside the blood vessel is Newtonian, which is like initial step in the computation. So the non-dimensional numbers involved are what we do is we excite the bubble with external driving pressure. So you have these many non-dimensional numbers. First one coming from the amplitude of excitation, then the Reynolds number, which we calculate from the characteristic length scale and velocity scale, then Weber number, and then we have another non-dimensional number which is the ratio of rho c square of two compressible fluids. Then we have two elastic coefficients KT and KB, from which we can derive two non-dimensional numbers. So there can be there are multiple ways to represent these non-dimensional numbers. So here I am representing it as this, which involves so here you can represent E1 and E2, which takes care of two non-dimensional numbers which incorporates KT and KB of the membrane. Then you have additional non-dimensional numbers coming from ratio of bubble to the blood vessel radius, and also ratio of radius to the length of the blood vessel. So I have done only one simulation here, which is the non-dimensional numbers correspond to a capillary wave blood capillary and the fluids involved in it. So in case of you can take it as the blood can be taken as a Newtonian fluid which is close to water, and you can the bubble is assumed as comprised of pure air. So you have corresponding non-dimensional numbers for the particular case. And also I have taken E2 equal to 0 because that's I have taken the bending moment 0 in this simulation. So you have a pressure jump which makes the bubble collapse inside a thin membrane. Yes. Yes, I will move to the conclusion of the presentation. So my main focus was on development of scalable Eulerian Lagrangian solver. So and another main focus was on developing in an AMR environment. So the implementation wise, it's done in 2D and axisymmetric. Even in 3D, it works in serial test cases. But I have done scalability tests only for 2D and axisymmetric problems. So the main focus was like, you know, the how to optimize the I mean basically how to optimize a parallel front tracking method. So I developed like partition algorithms and communication algorithms such a way that communication is minimum and partition is in accordance with the AMR grid. And as the number of refinement level goes up, you can expect more distribution in the points and also better scalability in 2D. So the simulation is only like, you know, like in case of cavitation or inside a blood vessel, this still has to be carried out for more like, you know, parametric studies which are still lacking in the thesis. So I have listed like some work which I have started and couldn't yet finish. Most of the algorithms are developed in is developed in a similar structure both for 2D and 3D, and this is still need to discuss more on regridding and topology changes, especially in 3D, because that is two fundamental characteristic of Eulerian Lagrangian method, like front tracking method. And another aspect is like a lot of parametric studies are yet to be done. I have started some work on studying the resonance frequency of microbubble inside blood vessel, but it's still not complete, or still in I have to carry out a lot of study on that. And another one was studying, you know, how like, you know, stress and strain of the compliant vessel is. The problem here is we have taken an assumption that it's a zero thickness membrane, which is in real case it's not. So maybe the immersed boundary has to be extended to a 3D one with non-zero thickness. So yeah, these are the things I'm planning to do. Yeah, so I have to thank, of course, the ITN project, which funded our project. So we 15 students were part of this, and it was a great experience in many sense. And of course, I would like to thank my supervisor, who has helped me in academics and also in beyond that. And of course, a huge thanks to the provider of Basilisk, Stefan here. And I would like to thank all my friends, families, and colleagues. who has helped and be part of the project. Yes, that's it.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation.